Last week in our gospel, we heard from Matthew the story of the feeding of the 5,000. Now, in modern theology, there are frequent attempts to rationalize this miracle. It defies the laws of physics to just create fish and bread from nothingness. But in the ancient world, such miracles were not unheard of and are attested to as being done by Moses and the prophets. While it defies logic, we are meant to take that story at face value as a miracle and not really overanalyze what really happened. And we are meant to understand the apostles were witnesses to this event and that they saw a miracle at the level or exceeding that of Moses or Elijah. This week, we pick up right where we left off last week. The disciples have just finished cleaning up the baskets of fish and bread, and Jesus is wrapping up his preaching, and it is time for the 5,000 to disperse. They are tired, and they want to get back on the road. Jesus has been tired before the day even began, and had just spent the day preaching, healing, and then feeding the crowd. He needed some time alone. So the plan is that he would go up the mountain alone, and they would go across the lake. Now, the lake is not the size of Erie, but it was not small either, and going around it on foot takes a lot longer than going across it on a boat. But there does not seem to have been much discussion of how exactly Jesus was going to catch up with the group later. And there were not cell phones or the National Weather Services issuing maritime warnings in the first century. So when a storm picks up in the middle of the night, it is all hands on deck trying to ensure that the boat does not get swamped and they all drown. Now, in the disciples' defense, they were tired and then had spent the night trying not to drown. So in the midst of the storm, they see the form of Jesus walking towards them over the waves. And their first thoughts must have been that they were seeing something, that they were hallucinating. And then Jesus speaks to them. And then we get Peter. Now, Peter comes to represent the church as a whole and centuries later. And I think this scene serves as a warning for us as church. Because Peter, having had the experience of the feeding of the 5,000 and having spoken to Jesus, knowing he is not a hallucination, decides to try to make God bend to his will. First, he decides to get out of the perfectly good boat that he has been weathering the storm in and go walking on water with the understanding that Jesus will bend the laws of physics for him. And then second, when he fails in his attempt to walk on water, Peter demands that Jesus saves him from drowning. And I think that is where we as church often end up. We look to Jesus and we try to do something like Jesus without thinking through whether this is what we as people are actually meant to be doing. Especially when it's grand and ostentatious. Instead of staying in the perfectly good boat and ensuring it can weather the storm, we get out and try to prove that we can walk on water. And then when we fail, we call on Jesus to save us. Instead of doing the small things, the things we have the skills and blessings and knowledge to get done, sometimes we dream too big, too fast. And then when our dreams do not come to immediate fulfillment, we ask God to fix the mess that we have made. But faith is not about glory or prestige or doing the grandiose thing. Faith is about living each day in humility and building brick by brick the kingdom, both here on earth and in heaven. Amen.